In the NBA, a lot of teams that are hyped up or in potential championship aspirations get a lot of media attention and get a lot of eyes put on them. But one team has really changed that narrative this season in these last couple weeks as their young core has brought on the attention of many other NBA fans, in which they have really seemed to find their mold and ultimately can build upon it this season. And that team is the Portland Trailblazers. They've been quietly dominating in the Western Conference even after this recent stretch of losses. And we're going to be breaking down and looking at all of that and more on this episode of Swish City. So let's dive in and let's get into it. So with this Portland Trailblazers team, we can see that they're currently sitting at 13th in the Western Conference, and in a star-stacked Western Conference with a team that doesn't really have, its fundamental building blocks of, star one or star two really identified for this Blazers team. This is where they kind of were predicted to sit, and I had them finishing around 14th or 15th in the Western Conference. I didn't think the Pelicans would be this beaten up, and if the Pelicans were fully healthy, they would have been a little bit higher. But the Blazers, even if they have been, a little bit of not the best winning team in the Western Conference, they have showed some great life, as we've seen since January them go on these really big winning stretches. We see them win 4 straight by a loss, then win 6 straight, lose 4, lose 1, win another, and now on this recent 5-game skid. But even in this 5-game skid, they have shown some great performances, taking on the teams of like Boston and New York in the Eastern Conference, and giving them some good contests with their recent performance versus New York going to overtime. And a lot of fans have kind of, turned their eyes on some of these players with Portland, in which a team that many thought were, lost in their rebuild, didn't really have that true number one star, didn't really have, that really team identity for this squad going into this season, really changed that narrative this year, as they've been able to really find their identity with their young stars and kind of molding out their players that they've been really building with. We want to look, like I mentioned, at their stats. We can see guys like Anthony Simons, who's, been that tenured veteran for this Blazers team, for this squad as one of their younger guys one of those leaders. He's obviously been fantastic for them offensively, but guys like Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson have really risen through the ranks as their young guys and have really put on those building blocks, but also their wings in Denny Avida and Chumani Kamara have really found themselves on the defensive side alongside rookie Donovan Clingan. And that's where you have the real actual fundalization of this Blazers team really being built, and you can kind of see where the direction of this team could really head into for the future as well, with them continuing to get better. So let's dive in and let's analyze some of these players. I think the person that definitely deserves, the biggest apology and the person that deserves the most recognition for this is Scoot Henderson, as Henderson was viewed as a top 2 pick just dating back to last year's NBA draft, when him and Victor Wembanyama were set to be those top tier guys. And Brandon Miller was drafted ahead of Scoot Henderson by the Hornets due to positional fit. And a lot of people were questionable with that fit. But ever since Brandon Miller has, dealt with some injuries alongside Scoot, has shown the rise alongside LaMelo, people have kind of written that away. And with Scoot, he didn't have the greatest rookie season, and coming into this year, struggled a little bit to start. But since, the second half of the season, Scoot has really turned up and turned those heads right back around to giving him that praise, which he definitely deserves, as he's been one of those main engines for this point guard unit, specifically coming off the bench as well for this squad, with them running, Sharp and Simons in that starting lineup. But Scoot has been absolutely fantastic for this Blazers team as a distributor, but also as a scorer, finding his will and finding his way to attack the basket and get his own, and really growing into the player that he truly set out to be. And that's why you kind of can't write off these guys, 1 year in, or 1.5 year, half years in. You got to wait 2 to 3 years to fully see their potential in some of these teams. And Scoot is really emerging to that this season with the Blazers, as he can show to be that dominant point guard for this squad and being that focal runner that they did, see when they drafted him 3rd overall last season. And I'm hoping to see that Scoot Henderson rise, go up through the ranks through Portland as well. And it's tough for Scoot as well because Portland, smaller market team, doesn't get as much media coverage. So it's a little bit tougher for him to people, to really find out how he's been playing this season unless you really watch or tapped into these Blazers games as they're not on national television as much. And in these recent contests, he has been fantastic. But alongside Scoot, there also been some other great pieces as well for this team. As like I mentioned, we have seen guys like Tumani Kamara and Shaden Sharp also been very, very great. Tumani, like I mentioned, alongside Denny Avila, has been those defensive pieces for this Blazers team. And Denny Avila was or not, I mean Denny Avila, but Tumani Kamara was a throw-in in a trade last season with Grayson Allen and Yusuf Nurkic for DeAndre Ayton and Tumani Kamara. And Kamara has made that presence known as he's the defensive anchor for this Blazers team and has, gotten Defensive Player of the Month, I believe, in the most previous month, and definitely deserves those recognitions as the 6'7", wing, 6'8" wing has been absolutely fantastic as a length, ability, size, and someone that the Phoenix Suns fans are definitely regretting trading at this point due to the fact that he has been so big on that side of the ball, really extinguishing and finding out that core defensive metric for this Blazers team and being that defensive piece for them as a young guy. He's not going to, take away from those shot opportunities from guys like Scoot and Shaden. He's going to be a guy that's willing to play on that defensive side of the ball, and I really like that. And Avida was a piece that they got in trades from Washington, one that was a questionable trade as well, but one that very, very fit in well with this team. And alongside that, Shaden Sharp has also seen his ranks rise through with this Blazers team as he's really been able to transcend as that scorer for this Blazers squad alongside Shaden Sharp. Now, this Blazers team doesn't have the best three-point scoring, and in a three-point dominant league, having a guy like Anthony Simons is definitely needed. But if you're going to want to build around this team, and Simons isn't in the long-term future, adding some shooting and scoring alongside these guys would definitely be helpful. But Sharp, obviously one of the best downhill scorers in the NBA, comes with that slashing tenacity and is ready to throw it down whenever he can, and he does it very, very graciously for this Blazers squad. And as a Kentucky fan, this is something that I wanted to see him kind of break through with that mold. This is something that we knew he could have been if he had played for Kentucky, and with him dealing with injuries for the Blazers and once again being in Portland in a smaller market, there hasn't been a lot of praise or hype for a guy like Shaden Sharp that there would be around some other guys. But a guy like Sharp could definitely be one of those nice, young, intriguing, high flying, slashing scorers for this Blazers team that they could desperately use for the future as well, alongside guys like Scoot Henderson, Tumani Kamara, Denny Abida, Donovan Clean, their rookie they drafted, and etc., whoever else they draft in the future. But just because this Blazers team does have some, young guns and some guys that do deserve to be here, they do have some guys that could potentially be on their way out in the future now. With the Blazers, there's obviously a cap floor, and with trading some of these guys and with seeing their young group kind of really mesh, they could kind of put themselves into the stratosphere of teams like Oklahoma City and the Rockets if they want to invest in some of these veterans or potentially get some guys that could really fit alongside some of their young guys in a little bit better of a mold. And I do think that one of those guys that could potentially be on the way out because of that is Jeremy Grant. Now, Grant does make $40 million for this Blazers team, and it is a large chunk of why this team is able to, stay at that salary floor, obviously. But with some of these younger guys getting extensions and getting bigger contracts, they obviously won't have to maybe hold on to Jeremy Grant as long. Now, Grant is one of those veterans that has expressed he loves staying in Portland, has wanted to stay in Portland, and he's had runs with some, smaller market teams. So it would make sense for him to, want to stay here. But unless he's willing to take, that bench role and the Blazers are willing to run a bench guy making $40 million, then he can stay. But if, to my knowledge, that's not what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to take that $40 million and invest it into, some other contracts, maybe two $20 million contracts that could be a little bit of a better fit or maybe a little bit younger, but still having that veteran presence. And I think the Blazers could get that done depending on what pick they get this year and with their future draft capital as well. If they're willing to trade that alongside a player like Jeremy Grant, they could ultimately give a team that's looking to do a little bit of a reset ample time to get a nice young draft pick while also taking on a bad contract with the Blazers, kind of finding two guys that could help them out a little bit more. Maybe a team like the Wizards or potentially a team that's still looking to be bad could take on this contract as well. And I don't have a picture for it, but because I forgot to grab it, but I want to mention another player as well that I think that could potentially be on their way out, and that is DeAndre Ayton. Like I mentioned earlier, Ayton was brought in for that Tumani Kamara trade alongside him, and that was a big move for the Blazers to find that. But and Ayton was supposed to be the best piece out of that, and unfortunately he wasn't as Tumani Kamara was. But for this Blazers team, I do believe that kind of buying in and finding those young guys that they want to work with and really use is key. And a guy like Ayton making around $30 million with Klingon kind of emerging himself as that young big that they want to build as a shot blocker, as a rim protector, as a guy who can score in the post and is a little bit more consistent than Ayton is as well. I think a guy like Ayton could also be, utilized on the market as well by this Blazers team. Like I said, the bigger contract guys obviously going to be a little bit harder for them to trade, but since they're not in any, second apron restrictions or anything like that, they could get off these contracts in Jeremy Grant, in DeAndre, and potentially even Robert Williams as well going into next season, into the offseason, to add and bolster around this Blazers team with real ample veterans that are ready to win now and are ready to compete, to kind of give the Blazers a little bit of a jump. Maybe not a jump to take them into, a top 4 or top 5 seed in the Western Conference, but a jump to take them from, where they currently sit now at 13th in the Western Conference and being towards, the bottom pit of trying to figure out what direction they want to go, to maybe climbing into that, 10, 11 potential spot for this Western Conference and really being on the brink of being that team ready for the playoffs in 1 to 2 years. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, what you guys ultimately think. Like I said, I think this Blazers team is really, really underrated. It's brought out some great games offensively and defensively with the likes of guys like Tamani Kamara, DeAndre, Denny Avila, Donovan Clingan, really locking on that defensive side. And then offensively, guys like Sharp, Scoot, Simons, etc. Jabari Walker, even versus the Boston Celtics, had a fantastic three-point shooting night. Guys like that, you got to kind of find out those gems. Who's going to stick long term? Who potentially could be on the move? Who are some other young guys you've had in this roster or rotation that haven't really stood out that you could potentially look to move to get in some more ready NBA guys? I think that this Blazers team could potentially even jump up to like an 8 or 7 seed, depending on how this Western Conference shakes up with their veterans and how many teams decide to, let go of that playoff chase. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. They're definitely a team I wanted to talk about, definitely a team I wanted to discuss my thoughts on. So let me know your thoughts. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out.